So this is John Bull. For the 18th, 19th and early 20th century, he was the national personification of the United Kingdom. Usually a stout, middle-aged, matter-of-fact man, and occasionally even an actual bull. Before the age of television and Twitter, characters like these became powerful images in shaping our perceptions of nations and neighbours. And while their origins were often light-hearted and harmless, as tensions grew in Europe at the end of the 19th century, this satirical imagery began to take a darker turn. We now consider maps as a functional tool, a depiction of geographical certainty to guide us. But at the turn of the 20th century, satirical Serio-Comic Maps like this had grown popular as a form of cartography, one that characterised nations with key figures or even creatures that assumed the exact form of their respective countries, while also reflecting their national identities and agendas. Origins to this style included Leo Belgicus, that depicted the Low Countries, that is present-day Belgium and the Netherlands, in the form of a lion. Robert Deaton's popular caricature series Geography Bewitched comically illustrated the British Isles as various characters, and the idea was eventually expanded upon to include more of Europe in William Harvey's Geographical Fun series. These had all been popular products, created solely to amuse and entertain. But when the second half of the 19th century felt the strain of an increasingly complex balancing act to maintain peace in Europe, this style developed an international viewpoint, and it gradually became more opinionated in its depictions. Europe's full characterization was first prompted by the breakout of the Crimean War in 1853. It began here with four protagonists depicted as animals: a British lion, a French eagle, predictably a turkey for European Turkey, and a Russian bear that, while appearing innocent enough, is labelled with various unflattering terms and having its toenails cut by the Allies in Crimea. The continent finally became fully characterised in 1870 here, during the Franco-Prussian War. Prussia can be seen with its weight crushing Austria while reaching for Belgium and fended off by a defensive France. While Britain is an old hag turning its back on the conflict, and an animalistic Russia seemingly searching for spoils in Eastern Europe while Prussia's back is turned. What was so unique about this new style of cartography was not just the visualisation of the national identities, but how their interactions with each other on the map could bring life to very real national fears, rivalries, and agendas. No more so than in Frederick Rose's influential series of Serio-Comic Maps that refined the genre. Which brings us back to John Bull and his friends, published in 1900, where no detail is wasted in capturing a continent on the eve of self-destruction. This particular map focused on the continent's response to the outbreak of the Boer War in South Africa. John Bull here is seen marching into battle attacked by two wildcats, representing the two Boer republics in South Africa that had declared war on Britain in 1899. During this, the nationalist section of Ireland has taken the chance to vent at him, but is restrained by the loyalists. Spain is sulking over the loss of her colonies to America and offers no support. Germany, backed by his growing industrial strength, is preoccupied building his fleet that would eventually begin the Anglo-German arms race in the lead up to World War I. And France, then still perceived as just as much of a threat to British interests as Germany, is threatening to scratch back at the island. But where Britain's overseas colonies are illustrated as stores of ammunition backing him up, France's are illustrated as broken toys weighing her down. Then there is no ignoring the looming presence of Russia with its tentacles gripping Poland, Finland and China, while also creeping towards Persia and Afghanistan. The use of creatures like the octopus to evoke an instinctive unease in the reader would become one of the hallmarks of the genre in portraying national rivals. In these artistic decisions, Frederick Rose had clearly authored this from a British perspective. As these maps became increasingly political, they began to offer unique and sometimes contrasting views on world events depending on the country of origin. Five years later, this map illustrates just this. Capturing the Japanese perspective during the Russo-Japanese War, Russia, once again cast as a sprawling octopus, is depicted as the aggressor reaching into Europe and the Middle East, but this coverage is extended to include Russia and Japan's rivalry for expansion into Korea and northeast China, the war having been started by Japan's attack on the Russian fleet stationed at Port Arthur. Then another 10 years later, just before the outbreak of World War I, this French image instead casts the German eagle with the grasping tentacles of the octopus, highlighting French fears of an expansionist and aggressive Germany. European tensions had finally reached their boiling point. So with war declared and allegiances established, the contrasting viewpoints of these images became even starker. In this famous British perspective from 1914, protagonists are stereotyped as their respective dogs. A British bulldog and French poodle in a united front against a German dachshund and Austrian mongrel, both also under pressure from the Russian steamroller to the east. Still relatively light-hearted in tone, as at its outbreak, most commentators thought the war would be short. In contrast, this depiction of the German viewpoint shows a confident German Michael, their equivalent to John Bull or Uncle Sam, striking out against aggressors Russia and France to both sides, while Britain is implied to be cowardly using its wealth to get other nations to fight its battles. This message is repeated more potently in the same author's second map, where Germany and Austria-Hungary are the only humans fighting off a range of beasts, illustrated according to their perceived threat. Such brazen, agenda-driven contrasts and viewpoints for the same conflict could almost be considered comical if it wasn't for the human tragedy the conflict would grow into. And consequently, as the scale of the war did become apparent, this genre of map-making faded away naturally. The messages and events captured in these maps were too intricate and too many. Simpler and bolder propaganda was needed to wage this war, to distribute a message more effectively to a population. We can see this change happening here in 1915. A spider elicits the same response as the octopus did. This time Germany casting John Bull as a malevolent monster stringing up those under its influence. Looked upon by the German eagle, blaming British imperial ambitions for starting the war. An accusation thrown back by this French poster in the same year, warning of German expansion. The stylistic elements from the fading Serio-Comic Map genre can be seen in both, but the illustrated characters are separating from the maps. The content and message is simplified to something far more direct. It's us versus them. The war would reach its conclusion, but the Serio-Comic Map genre never returned to popularity. Its influence and recurring motifs would live on into the propaganda and cartoons of World War II and beyond. And the genre's 60-year lifespan leaves us with a fascinating series of geopolitical snapshots that foreshadow a continent on the brink of destruction. Now in the present day, news and global media moves far quicker than it ever has. What chance would poring over the intricacies of large printed maps like these have against 280 characters? But it makes me wonder what the genre would look like today, with satirical cartoons still being alive and well. How would artists fit leaders, rivalries, and global events into a full Serio-Comic map in 2020? Thank you so much for watching. This style of video was something that was completely new for me as a way to still produce something while we are all currently locked indoors. If you're interested in learning more about the subject matter, I will suggest one book that really helped me in my research, which is this substantial volume called War Map. I picked it up at a shop called the Map House in London and contains many maps like you saw to pore over the details of. Anyway, I really enjoyed making that, and let me know what you think. So yeah, thanks again.